Hi guys, Jamie here from JB Mocean. Today we're going to be creating the video you're looking at right now. It's basically a snake that is slithering along a deck rail. Now of course the snake isn't real, it's been rendered in Cinema 4D, and the deck rail is just a photograph that I took with my phone. You can download that from the description below. We're not going to be focusing on how the snake was made, more so the compositing side of things. So if you are interested in creating the snake from scratch, you can check out the video that I'm linking up on the top of the screen right now. But if you're just interested in the compositing, making the snake look like it's actually on this deck rail, then stay right here. We're going to figure out how we're going to do that. So let's get started on this. Here we go. Okay guys, so this is the snake that we're going to be using in our tutorial. And if you want to learn how to model up this snake and unwrap the UVs and texture it up, then just watch this video. That's popping up over here. But most of you probably don't want to go to that length. You just want to actually check out how the compositing is done. So what you can do is just create a capsule and set the height to about 700 and the radius to 10 centimeters, and increase the height segments to about 150 so that when it bends around the spline you get some nice smooth bends. What you want to do also is make sure that you're going to make it editable, and using the axis center tool, Shift C on your keyboard if you can't find it, just type in axis and it should pop up here, and set the Y here to -100%. Then that'll bring your axis down to the bottom of your object, and then you can just go into your coordinates tab and set that to 0, and that'll bring it up to the floor. So let's get cracking on this. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new material, call it background, and we're going to load in our background image. So deselect color and reflectance, we're going to be using luminance. Load the image. This is it here, deck rail. I'll put this in the description below so you can download it. And I'm gonna create a background object and I'm gonna apply it to that background object. So now we have our background object in our scene, and we got our snake. So we just need to line it up so that it looks like it's line up our snake so it looks like it's on our deck rail there. So we're going to be using our move tools here to pan around our viewport. So I'm just going to make this, try and get it to look like it's on top of the deck rail. You can use these grid lines here as well as a reference. So let's check out what that looks like. Select your snake object and use your move tool. Make sure that object mode is selected. And now if we just drag this along, it looks kind of like it's on our deck rail. So do your best with this. I don't really know how I can tell you how to do it. Just kind of do it, you know. Just make it happen. And when you slide the snake from left to right, it should look like it's traveling along the deck rail there. Okay, so I'm happy enough with that. Well, I say I'm happy enough with that, but I'm still moving stuff around. So yeah, again, we can leave it at that for now. So we want to bring our snake back to its start point, which is all the way back there, outside of our shot. Middle mouse click to jump into our top view. and that's where our snake is. Now we need to draw a spline using our pen tool. We need a reference to know when to start, or when to stop actually. We know when to start. Obviously we're going to start around here. So let's create our floor. So let's go here and create a plane. And we're going to drag our plane into about the center of our scene and then just kind of scale it up and scale it down. So I'm just basically trying to make the shape of my deck rail. And I'm only doing this so that it catches shadows. So it doesn't need to be, you know, covering the whole shape of the wood. It just has to be wide enough so that it catches any shadows cast by our snake object. So I'm setting this to be about 211 width and 1476 high. We can set the width segments to 1 and the height to 1 also. Okay, so now we have our, let's actually create a camera, make it active, and then right click, go to Cinema 4D tags and add a protection tag so that we're not able to move around our camera anymore unless we deactivate our camera. Now we can move it around. So now we got our snake and he is moving along our floor. Cool. Okay. So now we're going to create the spline that our snake is going to follow along our deck rail or along our floor. So jump into your top view, middle mouse click, and then middle mouse click again. So we're going to create a spline. It's going to start around here and it's going to go in an S formation all the way to the end here. So I'm going to select my pen tool and I'm going to go for the starting point, which is going to be here. And this, I don't know if you know how to use a pen tool, but you just kind of hold down the left mouse button, click and drag. That'll give you a curve. Do the same. Just holding down the button and clicking and dragging. And hit escape to end the spline, and let's see what that looks like. So that's kind of we'll see what it's like once we add the spline wrap to object. So select your snake object, hold down shift, and then let's go for a spline wrap. Holding down shift automatically adds the spline wrap as a child of your snake object. Now our spline wrap is looking for a spline to wrap around. So let's drag this spline that we just created down here. So we need to fix the axis here, set it to -Z, and let's set the mode to keep length. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Just going to deactivate the camera. So our snake is upside down. So we need to go into our spline wrap, go to rotation, banking, set that to -180 degrees. And that'll bring our snake to where it's supposed to be. Make our camera active again, and now if we just mess around with the offset, you'll see our snake is animating along our spline. So the way it is now, I want to kind of make the curves a bit sharper. So what I'm going to do is select my spline, go into object mode or model mode, and then select the scale tool. And I want to kind of drag this along the Z axis to kind of make our snake a bit more curvier, I think. And I want to move our spline down back to our start point. Okay. So now if we check the offset on this, select your spline wrap object and then just move the offset up and down. That's kind of better. So we need to increase the length of our spline. So middle mouse click to jump into top view. Select your spline and let's just add on to this so that it stretches out to the length of our deck rail. Select your pen tool and you can click on the end point here to continue on. So again, no real instructions for this, you're just kind of clicking and dragging and making curves. Hit escape when you want to end the spline. And let's middle mouse click and jump back into our perspective view. If we select the spline wrap object now, and if we start moving this snake along the offset, yeah, I kind of like the way it's kind of different. It's kind of a bit squashed here and then more stretched out here for a bit of variation. Yeah, I think we're going to go with that. So one thing you will notice is that our snake is not actually, it's beneath our floor. So we need to fix that. So deselect our camera and we can select our spline. Go into the move tool. Make sure that model mode is selected. Let's actually jump into our front view. Zoom in. We can move our spline up along the Y, so that it is on top of our floor, more or less. And if we jump back into perspective view now and make our camera active, and let's move this offset up and down. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So once we're happy with our spline, we can start fixing up our, basically the look of our scene. So let's just pick a point that we're going to work on. Go into our render settings, turn off save, set the output here to 1280 by 720, just so we'll get a quicker render while we're fixing up our settings. We're going to set the frame range here to current frame. Let's do a quick render to picture view on this. Okay, so this is what we got. So we need to fix it, obviously. So we got this gray plane and we need to make it so that it blends in with our background image. So how do we do that? Well, we need to select it and we need to create a duplicate of our background material. Now the reason we need to duplicate it is because our background material is using the luminance channel, but if we use the luminance channel for our floor, it won't be able to receive shadows. So let's duplicate that. Let's call it floor. Open it up. Let's copy the shader here. Turn off luminance. Go into color, turn that on, and let's paste that shader in. Now we can apply it to our floor and set the projection to frontal. And let's do a rendered picture viewer on that, see what we got. So now you can see that it's kind of blended in, but we still got these kind of gray lines where our plane is. So to quick fix for that is, and you might already know this, you probably do, right click on your floor, go to Cinema 4D tags, compositing, add a compositing tag, turn on compositing background. Now if we do a render to picture viewer on that, you're going to see that our lines here where our plane are going to disappear, and we're going to get some nice blending there between our floor and our background image. So that's looking good. Well, it's not looking good, but it's looking better than this. So moving on, we need to create a physical sky object. Add that to your scene. Go to Cinema 4D tags, compositing, and let's turn off scene by camera. So that's going to give us a nice garden feel and style to our scene without any effort whatsoever. Go into your sky tab, or your sun tab actually, and let's turn off shadows. And let's go into our body texture. Now remember, if you don't know what this is or how it was created, watch the snake modeling and texturing tutorial that I've put up here. The link is above here, and you can see how that's done. So go into your body material. We're going to go into our reflectance channel, reduce the roughness down to about 3%, set the reflection strength to about 20, maybe 24. And we can now turn on ambient occlusion. Let's see what we got now. So that's looking pretty cool right away. And what we can do actually is go back to our render settings, go into ambient occlusion, set the maximum ray length to 30 centimeters. Let's do a quick render to picture viewer on that. So that's going to shorten the distance that our ambient occlusion is going to be something or other. I don't really know how to explain it. It's just going to look better. You can see there in our previous render that the shadow cast by our ambient occlusion is a bit longer. So we reduced the ray length, and now it's shorter, which is much better. Because we don't have many shadows in this image, so we want to replicate that. So let's animate our snake now. So if you haven't already done this, which you probably haven't, your frame range is probably set to 90 frames. You're going to want to set this to 400 and then drag out your timeline there. Make sure you got 400 frames in your scene. And on frame 0, go into your spline wrap, bring the offset all the way back so that your snake is out of shot. So for me, it's at minus 23%. I'm going to set a keyframe. I'm going to go to about frame 160. And I'm going to bring my snake to about here, which is, for me, 26%. It may differ for you. And I'm going to set a keyframe. Now, I want my snake to slow down at this stage. Kind of stop, actually. So I'm going to let it play for a few frames. 195. Add another keyframe. And then he's going to go all the way to the end. And he's going to go out of shot. So I'm dragging up the offset here all the way to the end, just so his tail leaves the shot. And then we're going to add another keyframe. Let's see what that looks like. So our snake comes in. He's all like checking out the area. He slows down, actually comes to a stop, and then he exits the scene. So I don't like the way he kind of just stops there. So what I want to do is Shift F3 on your keyboard to bring up your dope sheet. And let's select our first. So this is when he starts, this is when he stops. Select both of those. Hit tab on your keyboard to open up your F curves. Now what you can do is select this keyframe and let's just drag this out. So what I'm going to do is hold down Control so that I'm only affecting the part where he slows down. So hold down Control and Shift at the same time. So you're only going to be affecting the part where he slows down. Control and Shift. So you can see as I'm dragging this out, this is going to make the part where he slows down a lot slower. So let's see what that looks like now. So he comes in, he's going to slow down really slowly, and then he's going to take off again. And I also want to see the way he kind of takes off there really quickly. I want to slow that down as well. So Shift F3, and let's grab these two keyframes here. Hit tab on your keyboard, and I want to actually slow down the speed at which he takes off. So let's see what we can do here. If we just hold down Control and Shift and drag this black circle out, that should slow down the speed at which he takes off. So let's check that out. There we go. So that's looking pretty good as a whole. So he comes in really fast, a bit too fast probably, but we're going to leave it as. Slows down and then takes off. I want to slow down the speed at which he comes in also. So I'm going to select the first two keyframes, hit tab, grab the first one here, and I'm going to hold down Control and Shift and drag this out so that he won't come in as fast. Okay. Let's turn off all frames. Okay, so for me it's already off. Now what you have to do is hold down this button here and just let go of your mouse click, and that'll turn it on or turn it off. And what this does is make sure that your viewport doesn't try to render all of the frames as you're playing back, so you'll get a much more accurate depiction of timing. So turn that off. Let's see what that looks like again. So he comes in really fast there, really fast. A bit too fast. So what I might want to do is increase my frame range to about 500 frames. Shift F3 again, and let's just drag all of our frames so that we slow him right down. Let's see what we got now. Okay, better, but I don't want him to pause for as long as he does. So I want to just hit Shift F3 on my keyboard, grab these here keyframes, just bring this closer to the point where he stops. See what that looks like. I'm going to reduce that gap even more. Okay, this is what I'm going for. So he comes in fast enough. He's checking out the scenario. He slows down. What's that? Is that a mouse? Am I going to eat it? No, it's not. And he continues on. Okay, so we need to start. Let's just pause our scene here in the middle. and we can check our scene, and we can do a quick render to picture viewer on this, see what we got. That's looking pretty good actually as it is. So what we could do is turn on ambient occlusion. That's going to give us a much more realistic shadow, I feel. So if we turn that on right now, not ambient occlusion, I mean global illumination. Do another render to picture viewer, and we can flick between the previous render and the latest one just to see if that's making any difference. So you can see that it's given us a bit of a more realistic shadow there. So it's up to you if you want to use it. It's adding 2 seconds onto render time. I'm probably going to stick with it. But that is it for the Cinema 4D part of this. So next we're going to bring this into After Effects, and we are going to add a wobble expression. So let's set this up for render. So go into your render settings, and we're going to set this to be the same size as our image. So our image, our background image, this one here. So our image is actually, let's see, deck rail. This is our image. If we go to properties, details, we got 2500 by 1406. So we're going to render it out at that size. 2400 by 1406. The reason we're rendering it out, set it to all frames, the reason we want to render it out at such a large size is so that we can bring it into After Effects. So I have a new composition here in After Effects, and if I go into my composition settings, you can see it's set to 1920 by 1080. But what we want to do is add a wiggle expression so that we can kind of get a bit of movement here. Kind of like that. We're going to add a bit of wiggle so that it's going to look like our image is actually not an image, but it's actually a video. And somebody's holding the camera against this deck rail and their hand is a bit shaky. It's not going to be that shaky, obviously. But that's why we're rendering it out that large. And then we're going to be able to scale it down just so it's kind of slightly larger than our composition. It's going to move around like that. So let's set this up for render. So we're going to set the width 2400, height 1406, and we're going to go for all frames. We got 500 of them. Let's select a destination for this to save to. And let's see, anti-aliasing, set it to 2x2, 1x1, 2x2. Ambient occlusion turned on, global illumination turned on if you want that slight improvement of contact shadow. And that is pretty much it. So we can just save our file, go into our render queue, and let's add this to the render queue and hit play or start. So once this is finished rendering, we are going to jump into After Effects. We're going to import our sequence and our background. We're going to import our sequence, add a wiggle expression, and we're going to do something else with some blur to make it look even cooler. But yeah, so this is going to take about an hour and a half. So not too long. I'm just going to sit here and wait and stare at the screen while it renders. So I'll meet you guys in After Effects. Okay guys, so once that's rendered in full, what we can do is import our sequence into After Effects. So just go to Import and File, and you can grab the first frame of your sequence and make sure PNG sequence is ticked on there, so that'll import the whole sequence. Let's drag this down into this create new composition icon. Just let go of that. That's going to create a composition. If we hit Control K on our keyboard, that'll bring us our comp settings. So we want to set the width here to 1920 and the height to 1080. And now you can see that we got a lot of space to get the effect that we're going for, this kind of handheld camera effect on our what is actually a still image. So first of all, what we can do is just watch this. Let's actually decrease the scale on this. Hit S, select your sequence, hit S on your keyboard. Let's set the scale to about 86%. And let's just watch this in full. So that's looking pretty cool. And he kind of slows down there and has a think about what he's going to do, and then he eventually takes off. So this actually is playing a bit slower because it's not fully loaded into RAM. So that's the actual speed there. So what we're going to do is add our wiggle expression that's going to move our image around randomly around our composition. So let's do that right now. Select your sequence and hit P in your keyboard. Then hover over this little time stopwatch icon here and just hold down Alt and just click. Now in here, in your expression area here, we can just type in wiggle, hit enter, and then in the brackets here we can type in the amplitude. So we're going to go for, or actually this is the frequency. So the first number is going to be the frequency. We're going to go for 2, and the amplitude we're going to go for 4. Let's hit enter on that and see what we got. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Kind of looks like somebody's holding the camera with a bit of a shaky hand. So one last thing I want to do on this for a bit of extra coolness is I want to get some Gaussian Blur, and let's just drag this onto our sequence. I'm going to create a keyframe here at frame 0, and I'm going to go forward to about frame 24. So you can check what frame you're on just down there. I'm going to increase this blurriness up to about 27. And that's automatically going to create another keyframe. And then I'm going to go forward a few frames, maybe to frame 38. Going to go down to about 10 on the blurriness, maybe 14. And then I'm just going to bring the time up to just about where our snake is kind of entering our scene, and then I'm going to set the blurriness to 0. So let's watch that in full, see what we got. Okay, so that kind of adds another kind of our camera on our video is taking a second to focus in on our scene. Okay guys, so that's it for this tutorial. Hope you learned a lot, and I'll see you in the next video.